Mass shootings have become a grim reality here in America. Classrooms, concerts, shopping malls, places of worship, no corner of the public feels safe. And every time the cycle looks the same: wall to wall headlines, candlelight vigils, outrage on cable news, calls for gun control clash with calls for mental health reform. Politicians argue, nothing changes, except that the public grows more fearful, more divided, and more numb. But here's the question almost no one dares to ask. What if some of these tragedies aren't exactly what they seem? What if certain shootings aren't just random explosions of violence, but manipulated, orchestrated, or at the very least weaponized by hidden forces to serve an agenda? Events designed to shock the public into paralysis, to push policy through, to steer culture, and to consolidate control. In the language of history, false flags, in modern terms, psychological operations are PsyOps, playing out not in secret Cold War backrooms, but on live television right here at home. That claim sounds insane, offensive, even treasonous. And yet, history shows governments have used these tactics before. Nazi Germany staged a Gellwitz incident to justify invading Poland. The US Joint Chiefs of Staff once drafted Operation Northwoods, a plan to stage fake terror attacks, even faking the deaths of hundreds of Americans to spark war with Cuba. The FBI ran COINTELPRO, sabotaging political movements under the banner of national security. The CIA experimented with MKUltra, using drugs and trauma to test mind control. The Gulf of Tonkin incident, which pulled America into Vietnam. When you know the history, modern anomalies start to look a whole lot different. A lone gunman in Las Vegas hauling an impossible arsenal into a casino suite with no clear motive. Parents at Sandy Hook captured on tape smiling before interviews, then collapsing of grief. Students from Parkland transformed overnight into polished activists with national platforms. Eyewitnesses at Columbine, Aurora, and San Bernardino swore they saw multiple shooters, even as the narrative narrowed just to one. Are all these just coincidences, the chaos of tragedy, or are they glimpses of something different and deeper? A pattern that suggests that we're living through modern psyops designed to terrify, divide, and control. Because in the next few minutes, we're going to break down the history of false flags, then compare it to the patterns of modern mass shootings. By the end, you'll have to ask yourself, are these random tragedies or something much darker? Before I go any further, I need to be absolutely crystal clear about something. I am not in any way, shape, or form saying that Sandy Hook, Parkland, or any of the other tragedies did not happen. They did. Real lives were lost, families were shattered, and communities were scarred forever. I absolutely despise violence. I am disgusted by the horrors of these events, and I have nothing but sympathy for the victims and their families. My purpose here is not to deny any tragedy, but to point out strange occurrences, anomalies, and historical parallels that deserve scrutiny. Questioning official narratives does not mean denying the suffering of the people lost. It means asking why. We see these patterns that don't add up time and time again. So if you watch this video, know this. I condemn any form of violence. I respect the victims. And what I'm trying to do here is expose the way that trauma can be used or misused to shape society. With that being said, thank you, and let's get into this episode. The phrase false flag has its roots in naval warfare. Centuries ago, warships would hoist the enemy's colors before attacking, tricking their opponents into thinking that they were friendly vessels. The deception worked because it manipulated perception, and in war, perception often matters as much as firepower. Over time, the concept of the false flag evolved from a tactic at sea into a blueprint for statecraft, propaganda, and psychological warfare. History is littered with examples. In 1939, Nazi Germany staged the infamous Gellwitz incident, which German operatives dressed in Polish uniforms attacked a German radio station near the border. The attack was blamed on Poland, giving Hitler pretext to launch his invasion. The world saw Poland as the aggressor, but it was all theater, a bloody hoax designed to justify the war. 2 decades later, in the early 1960s, America's own military leaders drafted a chilling plan called Operation Northwoods. In declassified documents, the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff proposed staging a fake terror attack on American soil, hijacking planes, sinking boats full of Cuban refugees, even faking the death of U.S. citizens, all to create outrage that would justify an invasion of Cuba. President Kennedy ultimately rejected the plan, but the documents prove something chilling. The highest levels of the US military were not only capable of imagining false flag terror, they were actively planning it. The Gulf of Tonkin incident in 1964 carried the exact same DNA. The Johnson administration told the American public that North Vietnamese forces had indeed attacked US ships in international waters. Outrage across the country swelled. Congress gave the green light, and within weeks, America was neck deep in Vietnam. But years later, declassified NSA documents revealed that the so-called second attack never actually happened. It was a manipulated narrative, a false flag of perception, if not literal staging by our government. It gave the US exactly the justification it needed to escalate a war that killed millions. And these are just the well-known examples. The Soviet Union staged its own provocations to justify crackdowns. Britain's MI6 has long been accused of covert operations disguised as the work of enemies. In the Middle East, authoritarian regimes have used bombings or assassinations to frame dissidents. With this track record, the question isn't whether governments are capable of staging or manipulating atrocities. They are, and they've done it repeatedly. The real question is how those tactics have been modernized in the age of television, the internet, and social media. In an era where public opinion can be steered in real time, when images and sound bites carry more weight than policy, what better tools exist for governments or hidden actors within them than the spectacle of sudden violence? False flags have always been about control through deception. Today, with mass media amplifying every tragedy instantly, the potential for psychological operations disguised as mass shootings is greater than ever. When you start comparing major mass shootings, a set of recurring patterns emerges. Patterns that, to the casual observer, might look like coincidence, but to those that question the official story, suggest something much more deliberate. One of the most striking patterns is the presence of drills and training exercises that seem to shadow real-world attacks. At Sandy Hook Elementary, administrators had conducted lockdown training not long before the 2012 massacre. At the Aurora Theater shooting in 2012, the University of Colorado had scheduled a disaster drill involving a mass casualty event in the same time frame. During the San Bernardino attack in 2015, nearby agencies were actively running exercises on how to respond to a mass shooting scenario. Even in Parkland, Florida, where 17 were killed in 2018, they had a Code Red drill earlier that very day. To skeptics, this looks less like a random chance and more like the drill goes live motif, a concept rooted in 9/11, when NORAD happened to be running hijacking simulations as the real plane struck. In the world of conspiracy theory, drills aren't just preparation. They are cover stories, giving operatives plausible deniability while events unfold in real time. Now, before I do continue, I would like to say that as a Christian, I am absolutely horrified and disgusted by these acts. It is not diminishing them, but I do want to shed light on the plausibility of some governmental interference. With that being said, let me continue. Another reoccurring anomaly is the repeated presence of the early reports of multiple shooters. In the immediate chaos of the events like Columbine in 1999, survivors swore that they saw more than 2 attackers. In Las Vegas in 2017, police scanners and body cams recorded that officers were describing gunfire from multiple locations, not just the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay. At Parkland, students interviewed on camera described hearing gunshots from different parts of the building all at once. And yet, in almost every case, the official narrative narrows down to a single lone gunman. Authorities blame the conflicting accounts on panic, confusion, or echoing gunfire. But to conspiracy theorists, the consistency of these phantom shooters is evidence of either accomplices being erased from the record or the hallmarks of a coordinated operation being skipped over to preserve the lone wolf story. And then there are the manifestos. Increasingly, shooters are linked to conveniently discovered writings or online posts that seem to echo a broader political narrative. The Charleston church shooter's racist writings fit neatly into an already boiling culture war. The El Paso Walmart shooter left a manifesto denouncing immigration in terms that mirrored talking points from cable news. The Buffalo supermarket shooter wrote extensively about replacement theory, amplifying an already divisive issue. To skeptics, these documents feel almost too perfect, too aligned with whichever cultural battle is currently dominating the headlines. Were these genuine outpourings of disturbed individuals, Over and over again, these patterns appear: drills preceding real events, eyewitnesses describing more than one shooter, and written creeds that tie tragedies directly into the political climate of the moment. Each one of these on its own could be dismissed as coincidence or even chaos, but when taken together, they form a constellation of anomalies that cannot be ignored. The 2012 shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newton, Connecticut, became the ground zero for the modern false flag debate. According to the official story, 20 children and 6 adults were murdered by 20-year-old Adam Lozana before he took his own life. It was one of the deadliest school shootings in American history, an absolute tragedy and a disgusting act, shocking the world with its brutality. But almost immediately, cracks began to appear in the narrative, and the internet lit up with speculation. Viewers combing through news footage claimed that they saw a parent smiling or even laughing moments before cameras rolled, only to break into sob cues. I'm sure you can find some videos on YouTube to back this up. Conspiracy researchers pointed to this as evidence of crisis actors, while defenders argued it was nothing more than human coping, the bizarre contradictory emotions that emerge in trauma. Delays in the release of certain death certificates and official records only added fuel to the fire. To skeptics, this looks like a cover-up. To officials, it was the natural bureaucracy of handling sensitive information in a high-profile case. Then came the FEMA connection. Documents revealed a large-scale emergency pre-preparedness drill that was scheduled in the same region around the same time. For believers in the drill goes live theory, this was no coincidence. They argue that Sandy Hook wasn't a random act of violence at all, but an exercise flipped into a staged event to push an agenda. In this case, stricter gun control laws. The controversy spiraled out of control. Bloggers and conspiracy personalities pounced, producing viral videos claiming the entire event was a hoax. The victims' families were accused of lying, of faking grief, of participating in a government operation. Lawsuits later proved that many of these claims were baseless and defamatory, but by then the damage was done. Sandy Hook had become a cultural lightning rod. What makes Sandy Hook so important in the false flag debate isn't that conspiracy claims were ever definitively proven. It's that the event became so toxic, so radioactive, that even asking questions could destroy reputations, bankrupt individuals, and trigger mass censorship. In many ways, Sandy Hook turned the false flag from a fringe theory into a mainstream cultural battle, one where doubt itself became the very enemy. To this day, Sandy Hook stands as the most explosive example of how deep suspicion runs here in our country. Whether you see it as proof of manipulation or as proof of how conspiracy culture can spiral out of control, one fact does remain. The shooting's anomalies and inconsistencies have permanently marked it as the epicenter of the modern false flag debate. The 2017 Las Vegas shooting remains the deadliest mass shooting in modern U.S. history. Officially, lone gunman Stephen Paddock, a 64-year-old retired accountant and high-stakes gambler, mysteriously opened fire from the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay Hotel, killing 60 and injuring hundreds of concertgoers at the Route 91 Harvest Festival. But from the moment the smoke cleared, doubt and suspicion spread like wildfire. Police body cam footage, scanner chatter, and eyewitness interviews all captured frantic accounts of gunfire coming from multiple locations. Some officers reported hearing shots from different floors of the Mandalay Bay, while others insisted they saw muzzle flashes from hotels down the strip. Yet the official report narrowed it down to just one shooter, one room, one narrative, dismissing all else. Then came the curious case of Jesus Campos, the security guard hailed as a hero for confronting Paddock. He gave a single interview on the Ellen DeGeneres show, and then disappeared completely from the public eye. His story shifted multiple times. At first, he was shot before the massacre began, and then later it was after. The contradictions only fueled speculation that the timeline was being manipulated by higher-ups. The logistics of the shooting itself strained belief. Paddock allegedly hauled dozens of rifles, thousands of rounds of ammunition, cameras, and equipment into his hotel suite over several days, all without raising alarms in one of the most secure cities in the world. No hotel staff reported anything unusual, and surveillance footage was never fully released to the public. I wonder why. And perhaps most suspicious of all, Paddock's motive was never established. No manifesto, no political statement, no clear grievance. For the deadliest lone wolf shooting in U.S. history, the absence of a motive leaves a gaping hole in the narrative. To conspiracy theorists, the Las Vegas massacre feels less like a solved crime and more like a riddle buried under missing evidence and shifting timelines. Was Paddock truly a lone gunman? Was he set up as a patsy? Or was the public simply never told the full story? The 2018 shooting at Majority Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, killed 17 students and staff, reigniting the national debate over gun control. But Parkland also became ground zero for a different kind of controversy, the rise of the crisis actor meme. Within hours, certain students emerged as media darlings. Most notably, David Hogg and Emma Gonzalez were thrust into the spotlight, giving polished interviews and quickly becoming national figures for gun control advocacy. For mainstream outlets, this was the story of brave teenagers turning trauma into advocacy, and maybe it could have been. But for skeptics, the seamless transition from tragedy to professionally staged activism seemed a little too perfect. Hogg, in particular, was accused online of being a crisis actor. Old footage surfaced of him speaking on camera months earlier in California at a different event, which conspiracy circles seized upon as evidence that he was planted, trained, or recycled as a part of a larger PsyOp. Though debunked by mainstream fact-checkers, the claim stuck in the alternative media ecosystem, amplified by forums, YouTube videos, and memes. Mainstream outlets ridiculed the crisis actor narrative, framing it as a cruel attack on traumatized teens. In all fairness, it probably is. Yet the fact that the idea took root so quickly shows how deep suspicion of official narratives have become in this nation. Parkland wasn't just another school shooting, it was the moment when a conspiracy theory meme, crisis actors, entered the cultural zeitgeist and permanently altered the way people view mass shootings and tragedies. Why would governments, intelligence agencies, or hidden actors manipulate or even stage mass shootings? Conspiracy researchers argue that the answer is pretty simple: control. Every mass shooting is followed by an immediate policy debate. Gun control measures are introduced, surveillance powers are expanded, or new funding is pushed for domestic counterterrorism. The tragedy becomes leverage. Whether or not the event was organic, the political class uses it to advance agendas already sitting on the table. Beyond legislation, mass shootings serve a deeper psychological purpose. They generate fear and compliance. A population exposed to repeated, random acts of horrifying violence becomes more anxious, more dependent on the state, and willing to trade freedom for the illusion of safety. This is the essence of psychological warfare, using trauma as a tool of governance. Then there's the role of division and distraction. Every shooting is instantly framed through partisan lenses: left versus right, pro-gun versus anti-gun, freedom versus safety. The public fights itself in endless culture wars, while nobody asks bigger questions about who benefits from the chaos. The more society argues over these symptoms, the less attention is paid to the architects of these diseases. None of this is hypothetical. Declassified documents show that psychological operations have been studied and weaponized for decades. Mainstream institutions, of course, categorically reject the false flag thesis. Journalists frame it as cruel, harmful disinformation that piles additional suffering onto the victims' families. Courts have ruled that calling these events, like Sandy Hook, hoaxes is defamatory and has real-world consequences. Fact-checkers dismiss anomalies as confusion, grief, or misreporting in chaotic situations. And yet the persistence of these anomalies, like drills that coincide with shootings, witnesses who swear they saw multiple attackers, manifestos that read like pre-written propaganda, and evidence that disappears or is withheld, ensures that doubt will never die. For every official explanation, there are cracks that we will continue to pry open. The idea that mass shootings could be false flags is horrifying and offensive to many, as well as legally damning. But history proves governments are capable of deception. Operation Northwoods, real. Gulf of Tonkin, real. MKUltra, real. So why should we believe with blind faith that in the 21st century such tactics are off the table? Whether every shooting is what it seems or is not, one thing is certain: each tragedy is used to pass laws, shape narratives, and divide the public to expand control. With that being said, here are the challenges. Next time you see a headline about a mass shooting, don't just accept the story. Don't deny it or dismiss the tragedy, but look at the timing. Look at the policy debates that follow. Look at the patterns and ask yourself, who benefits from this fear? Because if history has shown us anything, it's this. PsyOps don't always need to be hidden. A lot of the time, they play out live on TV. Thank you for joining me here over Principle Over Party. I appreciate it. God bless. Leave a like and a comment. Subscribe if you have the chance. For the few of you that do end up seeing this, God bless. Tune in next week for my next episode.